Okay. This is Pushing Boundaries, a podcast about pioneering research, breakthrough discoveries, and unconventional ideas. Conversations with highly creative people whose work benefits humanity. I'm your host, Dr. Thomas R. Burney, and my guest today is Luciano Volpe. Luciano is the founder and managing partner of SLV International, a Toronto-based company which specializes in distributing and exporting Canadian food to Southeast Asia, Mexico, and the European Union. He's also a part-time assistant professor at Rotman Commerce University of Toronto. In 2011, Luciani founded a not-for-profit Inspire North. In 2020, Inspire shifted its focus and he started the podcast Behind Greatness. Welcome, Luciano.
Ah, thank you, Thomas. Happy to be here. I'm very happy.
Very good, and I'm happy to have you. So these, of course, are the bare bones of your professional life.
Mm.
It sounds like an interesting journey you have taken so far.
Well, for me, I guess.
Yes.
Yeah.
Perhaps you could take us through your career path in more detail, starting with your childhood.
Oh, wow. Starting with
Yeah.
my childhood. Oh, well,
Yes.
I wasn't a professional anything other than complainer, I guess, as a child. But
Okay. Okay.
no, I just as a well, I can give you the 411 on how I grew up, where I grew up.
Yeah,
Would you like to hear
sure.
that?
Yeah, that we would like that. Yes.
Sure. So I grew up in Toronto, in North York, kind of Midwest Toronto,
Hmm.
born of immigrant parents who came to Canada when they were young. My dad was 8, my mom was 14. They came from Italy. And of course, they were part of that large wave after World War II from
Hmm.
Europe.
Hmm.
They were mountain people, both from their respective regions, and came from very poor and devastated regions after the war. So they came with their parents to start a new life, and that's where I had mine. I have 4 siblings, all younger than me, so I'm the oldest. I'm named after my paternal grandfather, who I admired very, very much. Um, and I had a tranquil, comfortable, kind of middle class upbringing.
Hmm.
My dad was a teacher and vice principal, and then he got into politics. And my mom was a homemaker and educated herself post secondary when I was in high school. So she went back to school, excuse me, and then got her bachelor's of education afterwards. Then I took the trajectory that was expected of me. So I went to a good school. I went to a good high school, and then I went to the University of Toronto as an undergrad. And I studied a whole bunch of things that I didn't do well in, and some things that I did do well in. I was just trying to explore university. And then I did a master's in business, international business, at York University, which is the other university in Toronto, one of the other 2 universities in Toronto, where I did, and this is when things started to open up for me. So I was living in a bubble, as you probably could surmise until now. I decided to do an international master's in business not because I was interested in business. I thought it was just a next step. If I want to have a family and a house and do something with my life, I just go into business. It wasn't a passion of mine, but what was an underlying interest of mine was to explore the world. And this particular program allowed me to study and work overseas. And so that's what I did. I leveraged the language that I knew. So my mother tongue was Italian. I didn't know English going into school. I was 4 or 5 years old. Teacher told my mom that they put me behind by doing that, which of course is very untrue. But anyway, so I leveraged that language, and I studied and worked in Milan. So at the Bocconi University in Milan. And I lived a very frugal life in my stay there. Learned a lot of skills that way. I was completely alone. It was the first time in my life. I was 23 years old and completely alone with no friends and family. Um, and I figured things out on my own. It was wonderful. And what was actually what I took away from those 9 months or whatever it was, 9 months or 10 months, uh, I took the opportunity with very little money to travel as much as possible. So every Friday I left and I went somewhere either in northern Italy, Rome. I went to Rome 4 or 5 times, and then elsewhere in Europe. So Switzerland, the UK, France. War broke out in Eastern Europe that year, and I lost money on a ticket to Greece. That was the biggest kicker. That one there, I really burned me up not to go to Greece because they redirected flights and they had to fly over Africa, and I only budgeted a day and a half in Greece, and that killed a day of travel. Anyway, I'm giving you details that perhaps aren't interesting to anybody.
No, it's fine.
Um, yeah. So that's what I did. When I came back, I didn't know what the heck I wanted to do. All the while, I liked writing. I wrote poetry just for myself. Um, I enjoyed it, and I started to develop a different style over the years, or kind of a style that I fell into. I can't even name the style, but regardless, I really enjoyed doing it. But it wasn't even a thought in my head that I could pursue that as a career. Um, so I decided to do quote unquote something serious and go into the working world as a management consultant. Because back then in the late '90s, that was a thing, investment banking or management consultancy, excuse me. So I joined a small firm, which is something I appreciated because I wanted to work directly with um, managers and owners and people of seniority that were very close to the bottom, meaning me. And so I learned directly from the owners. But I got bored very quickly. Within 6 months, I regretted the decision. I stayed on for 2 years, and I moved to another management consultancy, and I regretted it within 2 weeks. But of course, I handcuffed myself because, as expected of me, I had a longtime girlfriend who was my wife and the mother of my kids, who I love dearly. Um, but I needed to save for a down payment to a house. So we wanted to settle down. I was in my late 20s at this point. I was 26, 27. Wanted to have kids. And so I had to keep working. I had a good income, but I was miserable with a capital M. And I didn't know what to do. I did not know what to do. I didn't want to work in that industry. Specifically, didn't want to work with the people I was working with. But I was confused because I hadn't had really any experience other than those 3 years of work, of full-time work. I didn't know where to go. So I just decided to leave. My wife was very supportive. My fiance at the time was very supportive. Oh no, we were married. We were just married. So my wife at the time was very supportive. We just bought a house, and she was pregnant. And oof, it took about 6, 8 months to figure something out, and I did. I was closer to where I wanted to be. I found. Please stop me if this is boring you, because
Oh
this
no,
is not
it's not
something I
boring.
usually talk about.
What did
Okay,
what did
you're
you
very
live
kind.
on? What did you live on during those 6 to 8 months that you were looking for a different career?
Well, I was a smart boy in a sense. I saved a lot. I wasn't a big spender. So we were working on savings. Uh, so I'm gonna say I was lucky. I planned it that way because I knew I was going into a career that I wasn't liking very much. So and it's not my. I'm not a big spender anyway. Um, on people, on food, and on gatherings. But absolutely, sky's the limit. Let's just do it.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I learned those skills early on. I guess I learned those skills living in Europe
Hmm.
when I had very little money
Hmm.
and needed to survive. Yeah, that's a good question. I've never been asked that. Yeah, if you want me to continue, I can
So after
continue. Right?
8 months, what did
Yeah.
you do?
I found an opportunity with a marketing services firm. They were moving into online marketing, which is a new space back then. It was early 2000s, 2002, 2003. And I, for the first time in my life, carved out a role in business development. Had no idea what that would mean. I said, okay, let's give it a go. And I stayed there 4 years. Within 2 years, I realized I can do this for myself. So it took me another 2 years to figure out how to get out, and then at the same time figure out what I was going to do with my own ambitions. So I came to entrepreneurism that way, very late, quote unquote. I mean, I should say I shouldn't say very late, but by conventional terms, very late. I
Yeah,
was in my mid-30s.
right. So
And
we
so
are
I
in
decided to.
we
Sorry.
are in 2007 now, 4 years after 2003.
Correct.
Right. So
Correct.
what did you do in 2007?
2007, I decided to explore what I decided to explore an old passion of mine is meeting and being and learning from new people and new cultures. I said, how can I marry that with what I've learned and what I know? So I decided that I was going to venture into um, international business, quote unquote. I had no idea what that meant, but I decided to explore anyway. I said, screw it. This is my life. If I'm
Mhm.
going to screw it up, I'm going to do it all on my own.
Mhm.
Again, very supportive wife. I don't know how she
Mhm.
did it. And I couldn't have done it without her support. Um, and so I decided to figure out how a Canadian could do business with a European, having no business experience on his own. And so I decided to figure out how to export what we have here to a market there. And so I started with food. Um, that's how it took off.
What food?
So
What exactly did you export and to
uh,
where?
yeah, I started with syrup.
Syrup, maple
Yeah,
syrup.
with maple syrup, of course, right? This, but I found an opportunity in Italy. Knowing the language really helped me,
Mhm.
and it was good timing. It was good
Mhm.
timing. They were looking for a vendor, a new vendor directly from Canada.
Right.
And long story short, we connected. We made business happen, and then I started to learn about distribution channels in other countries,
Mhm.
and I started to learn about building a brand. I started to learn how to make alliances. Um, I started to learn pricing models,
Mhm. Mhm.
and I I started to grow the business through distributorships in Germany and Switzerland, in France, and then I thought, well, why don't we try bringing a brand into Canada? So I went the opposite way. So I started overseas and I came into Canada, and we opened up our brand. It's called Can Nature, and we uh, we distributed at the height of it. So this is now 2000, between 2012 2014. We're in about, without Loblaws, we were in about 600 stores. Um, and that gave me a really cold, hard lesson in logistics, because Canada is a very large country geographically, but a very small country, population base and consumer
Mhm.
base.
Mhm.
So it started to become very expensive for us to ship products out to Vancouver.
Right.
And when you're guaranteeing national pricing to national grocers,
Mhm.
we started to lose money out west. But it was a good lesson. It was a very good lesson in brand building,
Mhm.
and we still kept an eye on our export business. Didn't let that go. And then this is where the doors kind of blew open. It was 2014. We met a distributor in Mexico, um, and he was looking for all kinds of different products.
Mhm.
I said, okay, well, we can help you, without knowing how we could help
Yeah.
him.
Right.
So we
You
just
did
said,
that.
yeah, we can help you.
Yeah. Sure.
And we went out and figured it out.
Mhm.
So we built a business starting from then, on the relationships that we built in Canada with other vendors and producers. So today we have a business where we consolidate and export, I don't know, about 50 brands, including ours, to Mexico, the EU and Southeast Asia. We work directly with retail chains and or national distributors in any one of those marketplaces. And we manage relationships here with vendors, with food brands, but we do food, beverage, and now also non-food. So better for you personal care products and so forth that are from Canada,
So
all with a unique story. So we sell the story.
how many employees do you have?
Oh, here in Canada, very little, 4.
Really? That's it?
Yeah, we don't need to have a lot. We built something very unique.
That is amazing. So do you
Yeah.
have warehouses?
Yeah, we don't own warehouses. We use third-party warehouses here in Canada.
Huh.
We don't need to own them. So we partner with warehouses that are specifically, I say designed, but specifically managed to do bonded and export consolidation with us.
Okay.
So
Okay.
yeah, our day is my day. Literally, my day is speaking and meeting with our clients around the world. So starting early morning, ending late at night, and managing partnerships and relationships all across Canada.
Amazing. So then how did you get into the not-for-profit Inspire North?
Yes. Um, how do I start answering this? Because there's it's become something that's so much part of my identity. I'm no longer just emotionally attached to it. It has become what I am. More so than my business. I guess if I were to rank it, it'd be my family, not for profit, and then my business. My youth and the mistakes of my youth and the naivete of my youth has always been something that I've carried with me and that I've wanted to talk about with other youth. I started to teach just because. So I started to teach at the post-secondary level from the early 2000s because I wanted to. So I decided I was going to figure it out, and so I started to teach a little bit at York University, and then at U of T, Robin Commerce, a business school at U of T, and I've been doing that since. So I meet a lot of 20-year-olds, a lot of 22-year-olds that are confused, and some aren't. And I like to share my own experiences with them to help them with whatever they choose in their own lives. And I found that empowering. I found it very fulfilling early on, 20 years ago. And so these are discussions I used to have quite often with my friends when I was in my 30s, school friends. And a bunch of us decided one day, why don't we do something about it? Why don't we just start an event? And so that we did. We started an event in 2011, just a one-off, where we invited 5 professionals from across different industries. So business, entrepreneurism, media, arts, the arts, excuse me. And we made it free for university, college-age kids. And it went really well. Halfway through, we had 20-year-olds separately come to us during break and asked us if we could do something like this at their campuses. I said, "Oh, okay." So let's do it. And so that's where the story started. Long story short, 7 years later, correct. By 2018, we were a not-for-profit. We had a bank, Scotiabank and Nestle Canada as sponsors. They're helping us give away bursaries and internship opportunities. And we had about 65 speakers come to our events and give their time and talk about their stories unplugged. And it was our mission was about leadership. And in 2018, we turned things around a bit, as you might know.
So how did you turn things around?
We wanted to reach a wider audience. Yeah. So we decided we were going to move away from physical events. So we were doing 7 or 8 events a scholastic year between October and March. And it was getting us a little tired. We had built a volunteer organization of students who then became mentors, who then became mentors of the mentors, and so forth.
Mm.
That was exciting, but it was very linear. And so we decided, why don't we do something? We decided on a podcast in 2018. None of us knew what that meant, but we did it anyway. And so it took us about 18 months to figure out how to do it, and then build a brand around it, and then invite people as guests. And that's what we did. So we wanted to do 2 seasons a year, 12 episodes per season, and 5 or 6 episodes in, we realized, holy cow, we got something here. We're not stopping. We're going to do this every week. And what originally became a desire to have a 20-minute conversation one-on-one with a leader, so to speak, became a 45 to 60-minute conversation with anybody around the world, with any background, who had an interesting take, an interesting set of curiosities that they were pursuing, such as yourself. So
Thank
a
you.
listener might know that you are or were a recent guest on our podcast as well.
Yes, this is true. So your podcast is called Greatness,
Yeah,
Behind
behind greatness.
Greatness.
Yeah,
So tell me about that. Like, what do you mean by behind greatness?
that's a good question. Honestly, I don't know why we're not asked that very much. So thank you for asking that. I'll give you my take on greatness.
Sure.
My ever-changing, fluid take on greatness. I used to think that greatness was developing something unique and good and impacting the world with this something and having recognition and accolades. So being great, being a Julius Caesar great, and whatever you chose. For the longest time, and would disappoint myself every time I didn't reach that. And then I realized, as I hit my 40s, I realized I'm going to be living a very disappointed life if I keep believing this, because it can't be this. It can't be this. Greatness, I think, means a lot of things. It means understanding that nobody is great. I think that's the first thing that we need to understand. That nobody is great. Is that great is imposed upon us. By whom or by what? We can have a long discussion, I guess, on it. But it starts with, I believe, and it could change. You could ask me this next year and it could change. It starts with empathy. And it starts with love. And these are 2 words that were poo-pooed when I was growing up, because it wasn't about love and empathy. It was about winning.
Yeah.
It's about success. It's about education, about being the smartest guy in the room. It's about being the most successful guy in the room. It's about having the shiniest car in the parking lot.
Yeah. Making money.
And making money, which is nice. I mean, I'm not going to complain.
No.
But that's a slice of my life that I need to have in order to make other things possible.
Right.
And I am far from perfect. In fact, if I try to strive for perfection, I'll be more disappointed than if I try to strive for greatness. But we started to discuss this the other day, you and I.
Yes.
There really is. There are 2 things that I'm finding are more important for me nowadays. I'm a father. I'm a father of two teenage boys. Well, one is 19. And I keep telling them, I don't know if they believe me, but I keep telling them because I want to make sure they understand this from me. I don't want my kids to look for my approval. I think that that's an unnecessary yoke to put on your kids.
Well, as a psychiatrist, I can tell you that you are not going to be successful. Your children will always look for your approval, no matter what, no matter how many times you tell them don't. In fact, the more you tell them don't, the more they will look for it. So I would suggest that you stop that line of inquiry. But go on anyway.
Well, I appreciate that. I'm going to say respectfully, I half believe you, because I I do want to believe that it will work.
Uh-huh.
But I say half because I knew no other life than to look for others' approval.
Right.
So I don't know how to live. I don't know how to live a youthful life,
Mm-hmm.
not looking for approval.
Mm-hmm.
I know better how to live it now, much better, much wiser to it. So I believe that my kids can live a life without looking for approval from others. They can. Maybe not now, maybe not in the next 10 years, but I believe that they can.
Eventually.
Um, but yes, I think that's one of the toughest things to shake because
It
it
is.
really is part of our indoctrination as kids.
Yeah, it may be in our DNA. I don't know even whether it's indoctrination or not, but it just seems natural, that when you are tiny and slowly growing up, your parents are these giants, right? And
Mm,
everything in your life depends on your parents. I mean, if they don't feed you, if they don't look after you, what's going to happen?
yes. Um, but what it's, so I say yes to this
Yes,
because
but
I completely but I look back at my young parent self,
mm-hmm,
and I know that and I didn't do it consciously, but I know that I quashed curiosity often and often enough to create an aura that that I shouldn't have created for myself. Right? When we talk about giants and talk about heroes,
mm-hmm,
um, I would rather be, and I hate using the word hero, but I'd rather be a hero to my kid because I've let them explore things and get muddy and get dirty
mm-hmm,
and get all scratched up than telling them the lesson on not to do that because they will be muddy, messy, and scratched up.
right.
I don't know
Okay,
if
so
I'm
getting
explaining myself.
getting away from your kids for a moment.
Yes.
um, Going back to behind greatness.
Yeah.
So, without getting personal in terms of the guests that you have had in the past on your podcast, what sort of historical figures would you
Hmm.
designate as great?
Oh, you cut out there, Thomas.
Oh, what historical figures would you designate as great? What in your mind would live up? I mean, in a way, which people from the past, scientists, writers, philosophers, whatever, politicians, who would you like to interview on your podcast who would live up to your rubric of behind greatness?
That is a really good question. Um, Hands down, the answer would 10 years ago, 20 years ago would have been Julius Caesar.
Mm-hmm.
Not a mistake that I probably mentioned his name a few minutes ago. Um, but I think today, if I think about it for an extra few seconds, it'd still be Dante Alighieri.
Dante. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Okay. So can you tell me why? Why Caesar and why Dante now? Why Caesar 10 years ago and why Dante now?
Well, maybe for obvious reasons, Caesar was known to be highly intelligent man,
Mm-hmm.
um, a a military leader,
Mm-hmm.
a political leader,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and a man who all the ladies wanted. So,
Oh, really? I
I
didn't
mean,
know
as a
that.
20-year-old, yeah, as a 20-year-old, this is what I learned. Of course, this
Okay.
is a man of power, a man
Uh-huh.
of
Yes.
greatness.
Yes. Yes.
Um, but as I grew a little bit older, I realized that Julius Caesar just did his own thing because he wanted to do his own thing, but he was an explorer. He
Right.
wanted to push his own boundaries, and geographically, politically, he did.
Yes, he did.
Right. Like no other before him. Well, that's not true. That's not true. Like no other Roman before him.
Okay.
Um, Dante, on the other hand,
Yeah.
lived in abject poverty.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah. Excommunicated by his church, living hand to mouth, in today's modern terms, couch surfing.
Mm-hmm.
at friends' homes, all the while steadfast in writing probably one of the Western world's most important pieces of poetry.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I deem it important because he decided to put in his contemporaries in his poem. He put himself in, and he put his mentor, who's Virgil, who's a poet
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
1,300 years prior.
Right.
Um, but he wrote and kept writing, and um, even though he was excommunicated for it, even though he was living in poverty for it, he wrote, and he wrote in his own, and this is the kicker, in his own spoken language, which was at the time it was called Vulgar Latin, and his version of Vulgar Latin was a Tuscan dialect.
Uh-huh.
So at the time in the 1200s, 1300, early 1300s, um, writers who wanted their message read wrote in Latin in Western Europe. He didn't write it in classical Latin. He wrote in his own language. But because what he wrote was so compelling and so unique, and because he was writing it on the run, on the lam, as an excommunicated uh, Catholic, people wanted to learn what he was writing. And the only way to learn what he was writing was to learn the language that he
Mm-hmm.
would speak.
Mm-hmm.
And because of this, and because um, it became so popular, his language that he wrote in became standard Italian 600 years later.
Really?
Standard Italian, the standard Italian language is based on Tuscan dialect directly because he wrote in this 600 years prior, and people wanted to learn the language in order to understand what he was writing about. That's
Ah,
how salacious his words were in poverty.
amazing. Well, no wonder you look up to him.
Yeah, yeah, and he had a courage.
Yes.
Again, we're propping him up. I'm propping him up maybe a little bit too much, but he had a courage that I can only believe I can have in that situation. Meaning I don't believe I can have that courage that he did.
So have you yourself run up against difficulties like, like he has, overcoming obstacles or people ridiculing you or making fun of
Oh
whatever
yeah.
you wanted?
Well, I mean, the ridicule always. I mean, the ridicule came, the bullying came when I was a youngster in elementary school. A lot of people have gone through it. I mean, it's not unique, but yeah, I mean, I went through that kind of hardship, but that doesn't define me. I guess the hardship was trying to. I was trying to break through, as I mentioned earlier. I was trying to break through my understanding of where, quote unquote, my career path should go, and I didn't. I
Mhm.
just expected it would happen, and it didn't, and that hit me in the face twice. And it was hard. It was hard for me for a half a decade, easy half a decade, if not a little bit longer. As I was,
It sounds longer. It sounds quite a bit longer.
uh, um, in reality, it was. Yeah,
Yeah.
you're doing the math very well. In reality, it was, but there were a good 5-6 years that
Yeah.
it was very tough because I
Yeah.
I found that I couldn't define myself,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
professionally speaking,
Mm-hmm.
and now I I find it I find it curious that I don't care about defining myself. I don't care. I know I do things differently,
Mm-hmm.
and I like it. I don't want to be a this or a that.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to do and explore.
Hmm. You mentioned about your father that he did, various things, and eventually he went into politics.
Yeah.
What sort of politics did he go into?
Well, he eventually became a federal member of parliament in Canada, and
Oh,
then
really?
yeah, and was a cabinet minister for a little bit too.
Oh, uh-huh. So is he still alive?
Yeah, yeah, he's still around. Still around. He retired from politics after he lost the 2011 election. He was the longest standing, I think he was one of the longest standing members of parliament at that time. He was a member of parliament for 23 years.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, and your mother, is she still alive?
No, my mother passed away 2015.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, thank you. So am I.
Yes, yes, I bet, I bet. So did your parents, let's say when both of them were still alive, in let's say in the 2010, did they sort of support you? Did they understand what you were trying to do?
Good question. Again, I've never been asked this. The answer is no. It's not that they didn't support me. It's not that they didn't understand it. They just didn't know. That's it. I didn't have the closest of relationships with my parents.
Mm-hmm.
I was very close with my mom growing up.
Yes.
And then, as many young boys do, I kind of broke away from my mom. But that always stayed with me. Yeah, that always stayed with me in her dying days. It was tough.
Were you present at her death? Were you present when she died?
And also a very good question. I spent a lot of time with her in her last 4 or 5 months of life.
Mm-hmm.
The last 3 weeks was in hospice. I spent as much time as possible. I didn't care. I just did. But at the moment of her death, I was her only child that I was not there at the time.
Mm.
It killed me.
The same thing happened to me. The same thing happened to me. And to this day, I feel terrible about it.
Why? Why?
Because I wasn't there to help her, to help her, as they say nowadays, to what do they say? Transfer?
Yes. And I know the word.
Yeah, they some word, not quite transfer, but
No.
um,
Crossover?
yeah. Crossover. Yeah, okay, yeah. Crossover. Yeah. Yeah, no, because I was living in Stratford, she was in Toronto. I didn't know she was dying, so she died on her own, and I think that's a terrible way to die, and I'm sorry I wasn't there. Yeah. Yeah. Well,
What did I ask you? Can I
sure.
ask you a question?
Sure.
Do you think she needed you when she crossed over?
I think so. I think so. I think we would all like to be surrounded by the people we love when we leave this world. Yeah. Well, let's move on though. Is the living. So is there a next project in your past after, is there life after podcasting?
I'm just getting started, so I don't.
Yeah.
I don't even know where this current project is going to take me. I have no idea. It's already morphed 2 or 3 times, and I expect it to keep doing that as we explore more in the conversations that we're having. So I don't know. I'm excited by the fact that I don't know. Also impatient about it.
Mm-hmm.
I like for things to move fast, and they almost rarely do. But in my pursuit of having things move fast, I find that um, it allows me to push. It allows me to push my boundaries, and eventually things change. I don't know if I'm giving you gobbledygook, but
Would you like your children to follow in your footsteps?
I don't care if they do or not. I've told my kids I don't have any expectations of them to take over my business,
Yes.
nor to do anything that I did. I the conversations that I have with my kids are about it just constantly exploring. They need to, if they're bored, get on board. And you can only get on board if you live through mistakes, if you try things, if you do things, if you push. That's what I tell them. That's what I expect of them. Both my kids are kind of scientifically inclined, which is
Uh-huh.
something that is
Uh-huh.
completely
Yes.
alien to me. I mean, I have no idea.
Yes. Yes.
That wasn't my background. And I celebrate it. And so the way I help them out is the way I try to help them out is give them the best opportunity possible for the education, for the educational component, the formal educational component. So one is studying outside of Toronto at a university right now, and the other one thinks he wants to. So tell him it's just open field. Just
Right.
tell us where you want to go, what you want to do.
Right.
But the other thing is sharing in the conversations, exploratory conversations that I've been having on the podcast with folks like yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I feel kind of good about it because it's something I could give them. These conversations I could give them that I otherwise couldn't,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because I don't have the expertise
Mm-hmm.
and I don't have the experiences of our guests. And I'm finding that it's enriching their experience, and maybe a little bit right now, but I know that it's helping them along more than what I see.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now, you did say that at one time you were writing poetry. Are you still writing poetry?
No, and that is a regret of mine. Um, I wrote a poem 2 years ago
Mm-hmm.
for the first time in 10 years. And it felt exquisite. Uh, I got lost in it. And I remember it had me remember how I used to get lost in my writing in my 20s. And I loved it. And it was tiring. It was
Yes.
tiring because I'm a working boy.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
and I say this with a little bit of regret because
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to be. I like being a working boy. I like having my own business. I'd like creating what I want to create, but it gets in the way of that other creative expression that I dearly miss.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Uh, Me too. Uh, I wrote poetry and
I know.
and I got it published, and it's called Cordless.
Hmm.
And I would love to continue writing poetry, but I just don't have the time for it.
Is it because you don't have the time for it? Is it because you don't want to make the time for it? I'm sure you've been asked this.
Well, yeah. No, really, I don't have the time for it because because I have other priorities, I guess. Yeah. So in a sense, you could say it's a choice, but uh, at the moment, I'm more interested in doing these podcasts, for example, or, I'm being asked to do a lot of lectures and workshops all over the world. At the moment, it's all Zoom. But
Hmm.
next year, I'm going to Prague and actually in person will be presenting a one-day workshop. Uh,
Exciting.
so yeah, that's always fun. And so just don't have time for poetry. I also like to write short stories.
Hmm.
I don't have time for that. What about you? Is there a book in your future?
Also, never been asked that. I don't know. I don't know. If if there is a book in my future, I don't want it to be an ego play, because folks in my industry,
Yeah.
um, there a lot of people in my industry have a lot to say. Um, but I find that a large share of the books are, look at me,
Mm-hmm.
exercises more than anything else.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't want it to be that. So I don't know what it might look like if there is one. I just I don't think I'm there yet to put a book together of any sorts. I just want to keep exploring.
Well, I have a title for you.
Go.
This is not about me.
Ah, I love it already.
Take it,
I love
run
it.
with it, run with it.
I love
So,
it.
okay. So in order for you to write this book that perhaps is just a seed in the back of your brain, uh, what would you do if you won $100 million? What would you do with it?
That's a good question. I wouldn't stop working, but my work might change. I'd want to explore artistic expression much more than I am now.
Okay.
So I think I'd want to carve out more time for myself to do that. So whether it is playing the drums, writing poetry, I'd want to get myself accustomed to that frame of mind that I used to have in my 20s. That's for sure. What's also for sure is I would like to help. I would like to help other artists. I can't tell you why. I just don't know why. But I feel like there are so many Dantes in the world, and they are ignored or cast aside, and that they are. I mean, the Dantes of the world are the culture makers. They're the folks who move mountains. When you can emotionally move thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of people because of an expression that you decide to invest in, how can there be anything more powerful than that?
Yeah, that sounds good to me. So my next question is, what does it mean to you to be human?
To understand that I'm possibly more than that. And that's what the conversations that are not work related for me every day are those kinds of conversations. The listener might not believe that, but they are. They are. I set aside conversations throughout the day that focus on the metaphysical and the existential. I don't believe that I am only human, and I believe that my containership. So I use that word with Jeffrey Kripal in one of my recent podcasts. Is it's too constrictive an idea. I think I am more than what I see and what I feel.
Any idea what that more is?
Well, I don't know. I'm exploring it, but I believe I am. I believe we are. We come from a source of light or perhaps sound that we can't sense with our five senses. I'm coming to believe that also because I listen to a lot of near-death experience stories from.
Yes, I was thinking of that just as you were speaking. Yeah, go ahead. Yes.
Yeah, and we've had a few also on our podcast who've had this. So we've had a surgeon, we've had a psychologist, we've had an artist, all with NDE experiences. And I've listened to, I'm going to say a couple of hundred at least, and they all give some sort of. There's always an underlying theme there, is that there is something beyond our five sense grasp that is pulling us, and I believe we respond to it the way we can by asking questions, just in our everyday, by asking questions, by pursuing things that make us feel good, like food, like sex, like speed. I think we're trying to subconsciously answer questions that we can't answer through those pursuits. But in essence, I think they are all an indication that there is a pull there to a source. I can't define the source, but I am developing my ideas on this. And I think the shackles of any kind of indoctrination are just that. They're shackles. They keep they keep our thinking too linear and too rational.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's another thing I'm trying to impress upon my kids, to understand that that's only part of being human,
Mm-hmm.
the rational,
Mm-hmm.
because there's so much more that we don't understand. I
Yeah.
mean, with your work, I'm not putting words in your mouth here, but from what I'm understanding, you're always trying to pursue things
Yes, I am.
in the books that you've been writing and the talks that you give,
Mm-hmm.
because you don't know. And that's what I
Yeah.
think I like about you,
Mm-hmm.
is that you admit that you don't know.
Don't know enough.
Hey, you don't know exactly. Don't know enough.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Don't know enough. Yeah.
I stopped. That's. And let me add this one thing. I've always been put off by know-it-alls,
Mm-hmm.
because I don't believe that know-it-alls know anything.
Right.
So as soon as I feel the energy of somebody who thinks that they know more
Yeah.
than I do,
Yeah.
uh, and it's not because they may or may not know more than I do. I don't care. But I don't want to be in that presence. I want to be in the presence of somebody who asks questions
Mm-hmm.
all the time.
Yes, because you yourself are a searcher.
I found that. Yes, I
Yeah.
would have to agree.
No, I like that. Well, we have to come to an end, Luciano. This has been terrific, instructive, a lot of fun.
It's been fun. It's been fun. Thank you.
Yeah, I really enjoyed our conversation. To our listeners, I say you can listen to Luciano's podcast, which are called Behind Greatness. And if you look for it on the internet, it's one word, Behind Greatness, one word.org. And next week, my guest will be Stephen Gillenhall, a descendant of the cavalry officer Nils Gunnarsson Hall, who was ennobled in 1652 by Queen Christina of Sweden, who conferred upon him the crest and family name Gillenhall. Stephen is a film director, father of actress Maggie Gyllenhaal and actor Jake Gyllenhaal. He's also a published poet, just like yourself, Luciano. Well,
I'm not published, but thank you.
you're not published, but you're working on it. And the founder of the Identity Development Institute in Los Angeles. So if you have a chance, please tune in a couple of weeks. That will be. We'll have Luciano live next week, and then Stephen Gyllenhaal after that. Luciano, once again, thank you so much for participating, and we shall stay in contact, right?
Thank you, Thomas. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. We should. And if we don't,
We should.
it'll be a mistake.
It will be a mistake. Take care. Bye bye.
Thank you.